Welcome to the How to Play video of Entrenched. In this video I am going to explain to you how to play Entrenched. And we start with this by setting up the game. So first thing that we're going to do is set up the field. So you have over here, you have the darker cards, the black cards, and you have the red cards. So we set them up in a sequence practically from 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Being the red side on one side and the black side on the other side, also known as hearts and spades. These are the king, queen and jack cards in your deck. So from here on we are going to place the unit cards, the starting unit cards. So this is the starting setup. The starting unit cards are the cards 4, 2 and 3. Well, practically 2, 3 and 4. You're going to place these cards on your side of the field. So if as the black player you're going to place them on the black side of the field. You do this by placing the 2 riflemen on the number 3. Practically that is your base. And the guard unit you place on the number 2. You do the same of course for the red team. So you also have of course the 2, the 3 and the 4. And we place these at their base. We put the guard in defensive position, which we will get to very soon. So, what are we going to do next for setting up the game? So, what you need to create is your draw deck. You do this by getting the exact same cards from practically your draw pile, as it's called. So, you have the 2, the 3, and the 4. Which are corresponding to the 2, the 3 and the 4 on the field. Outside of that, I'll place it a tiny bit higher so it's a bit more visible. Outside of that you also have the support card, the number 1 card, which you will place within your deck. This will be your starting deck. This is always the same. So these ones will go to the side, over here, right below the number 3 card. Of course, we will do exactly the same for the red card by also getting out the 2, the 3, the 4 and the 1, and we will place it on the side of the red cards over here. So outside of that you have multiple other cards, so which are also named, for example, 5 to 10 practically, the ace, and you have the jacks, the queens and the kings. Just to show you, I'll place them here. And you also have the ace, the king, the jacks, and the queen. Just for setting up the game, currently, I'm going to place all these cards on the side, but further away from your draw deck, so they do not get mixed up. So the first thing you're going to do is shuffle your draw deck. And we do the same for the red team. So now we have the draw deck. We have the reinforcement deck, as it's called. Outside of that, we also have the unit cards, which you will notice in the box. So the unit cards are different than the cards shown over here. They all have the same. The ones that you draw from always have the same symbol. And have actions on there. Unit cards, as we have over here, for example, with the riflemen and the guards, these ones are specific unit cards. And this is a completely different deck that you will use. So, for these ones, you have, for example, the 6 of riflemen. It depends on which cards you pick, which I will get into at the end of the video. You can also have, for example, the 7 gunner, or the 7 breacher, or 5 guard, and that practically up until 10, and the ace. These ones we will place on the left side, far from the game, or further from the game, so you do not get mixed up these cards. Practically, this is how you set up the starting game. So, to have a quick recap, you place the trench cards 1, 2, 3, and same on the other side for the red player. You place the two riflemen, rifleman 2 and rifleman 4, on your base, which is number 3. You place the guard in defensive position on number 2, and outside of that we will have the draw deck with the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 cards. The other cards for the draw deck you put on the side, and of course you shuffle these cards. The unit cards, the other unit cards that you still have left, you place on the left side. You shuffle these cards, and practically this is the way to start the game. So now we come to the action phase, and we're going to start the game. So the goal of the game itself is to get in total of 9 points. That's the most standard winning conditions. There are 2 other winning conditions, which is to annihilate your opponent. Once your opponent is not on the map anymore, has no unit on the map anymore, you have also one. And outside of that, if your opponent cannot draw up to 3 cards at the end of their turn, that means that they also have lost the game and that you will have won the game. So those are the 3 winning conditions, although getting 9 points is the most common one. The question is, of course, how do you get 9 points? Of course, you see here the numbers 1, 2, and 3 on both sides. You get points by getting your units on the other side, on your opponent's side. So for example, if I would move this rifleman over here, this would mean I would already have 1 point. The rifleman can of course also get defeated in combat. Once it does, you move it to the side, but you would still get the points for it. So for example, here you would still have your rifleman scoring 1 point. This is the most common way to achieve victory in Entrenched. So, to continue with it, the least experienced player starts the game, else flip a coin on see who the starting player is, and what you do is you grab 3 cards from your draw deck. So I have gotten 3 cards over here, and now we go to the action phase. Practically this is how the game will be played. So over here I have the 1, the 3, and the 4 in my hand, which would mean that I can do several actions. So to start with, from the list, you see the actions named over here that you can do on the cards. One of the actions that you can do is to move. So over here I have, for example, the 4 card. I can move then my unit that has a 4 in there. So here I have my unit with 4. I can move it 1 trench up or 1 trench down. So for example, this would be a move action. I cannot do it on the number 2 unit because I only have the number 4 in my hand. Another action, moving this one back, that I can do is to defend. I can put my rifleman into defensive position, which means that you move it sideways. And once it's in defensive position, the opponents will have an increased die roll by 1. For example, you already start with your guard in defensive position. I'll get more into defensive position later on in the video. Else what you can do is attack. For example, if my rifleman would have been over here, then it could have attacked the opponent. For example, mainly, I hope it is very visible, the rifleman, as you might can see, has different ranges. So over here you have range 0, 1 and 2. And they also have a certain die roll of 5, 5 and 6. So with this rifleman, this means that if I would like to attack, we have to check the range. So for example, if it's range 0, that means that I am on the exact same line. So if I would like to attack the guard right now, that means that this would be a range 0 attack. If I would put my rifleman, if my rifleman would be over here, this would mean a range 1 attack. And if it would be over here, that would mean a range 2 attack. Of course, I have to take into consideration that this is this unit is not the most powerful unit in the game. But luckily, every unit has abilities, which are stated at the bottom. So for example, the rifleman decreased the die roll by 1 when attacking and on opposing territory. So for example, if my rifleman would be over here and would like to attack the guard, that means that I would have an attack currently of a 5+. because that's the stats of the rifleman. But the guard is in defensive position, so actually that would be a 6+. But because the rifleman is on the opposing trench, that means that I'm going to decrease my die roll by 1, which would still mean that I can throw a 5+. So, for example, I am going to throw right now, and it is a 1, so my attack missed, and the rifleman is, and the guard is not defeated. So, that's one action that you could do. That's the attack action. Outside of that, something else that you can do is deploy and purchase. Purchase means that we have the card deck over here with all the remaining cards, the 6, the 5, the 7, the 8, and so on, up until the ace and the jacks, the queens and the kings, which are represented by lieutenant, captain, and major. What you can do with the purchase action is that you can combine cards, or you can use a single card for this, but at the beginning of the game this is impossible, that you purchase another card. So for example, I can put the 4 and the 3 together. I'll put it a bit closer by. I can put the 4 and the 3 together, which then I can purchase the 7. So in this situation, I would have purchased the 7, but all the cards that you use will instantly go into the discard pile. So you can only take one action with one card, and then they will go into the discard pile. So, for example, these ones will then go to the discard pile over here on the side, and I'll move this one a little bit further away and keep it face down so it does not get mixed up. So, for example, right now I have purchased the number 7. If eventually I would get the number 7 back in my hand, what I can do is deploy, which means that I use this card, put it back into the discard pile, because every time you use an action, it will go into the discard pile. And I can deploy my number 7. So for example, I have over here Gunner 7 in my deck, which then I put on my base. Last but not least, you start with the support card. And the support card, as I mentioned before, only has a value of 1. Outside of that, it has a few great advantages. It can use directions, which means that you can do any action with any card on the field. So, for example, I can move my gunner. I can also attack with my gunner. I can move it in defensive position. So this is very convenient. Outside of that, you also have the medic function. So for example, if my rifleman was over here and would get the pass, would be defeated, then I could use the medic function by putting, of course, every time you use a card, you have to put it in the discard pile, and I could get the rifleman back. But every time the rifleman, so currently would still stay over here, because every time the unit gets defeated, you remove the card from your draw deck. So I have over here the 4, you put it right next to the rifleman. If you would use the medic function, you would get this one back and put it into your discard pile. Eventually, you will get this card back by drawing the cards, and by getting back the 4, you can use the deploy action again, and your rifleman would be starting at your base again. The aspect that you have to take into consideration, of course, is that this unit will not get any points anymore. And before we get 1 point, currently it would then get 0 points. Only cards that are on this side will get points. It is something to take into consideration. Once you have played your cards or you have done your actions, you can go through the other phases. The first phase being the merge phase. The merge phase is where you merge 2 units and you put them sideways next to each other. I hope it is clear. So practically you put them like this. You can only merge units of the same type. So you can merge 2 riflemen, but you cannot merge a rifleman and a guard, or a rifleman and a gunner in this situation. So you can only merge 2 of the same units. This is after you have done your actions. What you can do with this is that they currently move as a single unit. So then you can use the 4, for example, to move them, but also you can use the 2 cards to move them, which is very convenient to move your units faster up. But of course, be aware that once they get attacked, that if a unit would be defeated, the attacking player can decide which of the 2 units would be defeated in that situation. So you could also lose units a bit faster on that and maybe more powerful units, since we have over here the 2 riflemen and the 4 riflemen, but of course the 4 has a higher value, so it has more purchasing power on that matter. Outside of that, there could be a moment in the game where you haven't used all the actions because you didn't need to use them or you did not want to use them. You can also then, for example, if we have played 2 cards and you still have 1 card left, so for example here I have the 3, I like my guard in defense as it currently is, so I'm not going to change that. I can just discard this. This is the discard phase. And what we then do is we go to the draw phase. So for example, I had the 4, the 2 and the 3 in my hand. I have played these cards by moving, for example, these forward, putting this one in attack position and moving these ones forward. And what I do then is draw back to my max hand size of 3. But I only have 2 cards over here, which is the 7 and the 1. So what you do then is you get your discard pile, you shuffle your discard pile. At the beginning it might be a bit on the slim side. And you draw the remaining card. So for example, I have currently 2 cards, so I draw 1 more card, which is the 4. This is the end of my turn. Then the opposing player, or your opposing player, will go. And we'll do the exact same way until somebody becomes victorious in this game. So, to get a bit more into detail of the game and how it works and how it can be played, I'd like to go into some extra aspects of the game. So, one part of it is the purchasing and spawning, because you will have 3 cards in your deck that you can purchase that are not units, which is, as I stated also before, you have the lieutenant, you have the captain, and you have the major. These cards will just stay in your deck. These are not units, but they will give you specific powers. For example, the major gives you the ability to attack with 2 different units this round right away. Also, it has a side effect that you can choose of, one of the 2, which is Cannonade, which you can attack 1 unit on the field with a 5+, an infantry unit. Outside of that, you also have the captain, which can move 2 units and can attack 2 different units with a 6+, and you have the jacks, the lieutenant, which means that this round your infantry units will attack with a decreased die roll of 1, or you can use the sniper function, which is attack 1 unit with a 6+. All these officer cards, these are the officer cards that you have, only affect infantry units. So you cannot use these abilities on any of the armored units, which I will also get into in a sec. That's at least something you have to know. You can purchase these cards, so you have the jacks, which is actually a value of 11, you have the queen, which is a value of 12, and you have the king, which is the value of 13. So this is the aspect of purchasing. So these ones will go into your deck and you can draw from them. So in an example, if I would have this, I could use, for example, currently the captain to move, for example, my rifleman 1 forward and my gas trooper 1 forward. If I would use the captain. Then I could, for example, use the lieutenant function. So everybody attacks with a decreased die roll of 1. And then I could use the major, which I can attack twice. So I could, for example, attack with my infantry unit, the grenadier, or I can use, for example, the cannoneer to attack the guard or the grenadier. These are rather powerful cards, but since they do not represent any specific units, they can also clutter your deck quite a bit. So that is also of importance to know that once you purchase these cards, they will stay in your deck for the whole time. You cannot get rid of them, which can also mean that they can quite clutter it. And now we come to the armor and anti-tank aspect of the game. So every team will have 1 armored unit, which will be or the landship or the ironclad. You have to pick prior. And these units are practically impervious to most infantry. So all the infantry cannot attack the tank units unless it's number 10. number 10, and I'm also going to grab the card, it's specifically stated on the card itself that the number 10 will have an anti-armor action. So, for example, you have over here the Cannoneer, which will be able to defeat tank units, while you have over here the Guard, which will be unable to defeat a tank unit. Outside of that, also, of course, the tank units can defeat another tank unit, so they also have the anti-armor function. To get the Landship, which is the ace, it has a purchasing power of 14. So whereas the officer cards had, for the jacks 11, the queen was 12, and the king was 13, the ace is 14 in total to purchase. But the ace, as is also stated at the bottom, can only be purchased in combination with an officer card. So you cannot, for example, get over here card 9 and card 10 to purchase this card. So it needs to be in combination with an officer card. So you need to have an officer card first in your deck before you can purchase the ace, also known as the armor. So since the ace cannot be targeted by any of the officer cards, so it cannot attack twice, it can also not decrease the die roll or move twice, it is a bit of a slower unit. You can still use the support card, if I can find it rapidly. Yes, the support card still has directions, which you can move the armored unit. Or of course, you will have the ace in your deck to also use that. So in general, the armored unit is slower, but since it's rather strong, it has very good firepower and generally a very good range. It is of great importance and can massively change the game if used correctly. But of course, be wary, because the armored unit cannot be re-respawned. Once it has been defeated, it is defeated. So the medic function only counts for infantry units. So if my armored unit will come to pass or is destroyed, I have no way of getting it back. Of course, if you might be a bit afraid that the other person still has an armored unit and you do not have anymore, your infantry of the number 10, which is always the anti-tank unit, which is the Cannoneer or the Grenadier, can of course be re-respawned through the medic function. So you can get that card back to defeat the opposing armored unit. And now we're going to go through the abilities. So every unit has its own abilities. So for example, as I stated before, the Rifleman, as is stated at the bottom, decrease the die roll by 1 when attacking and on opposing territory. So if it would be here and it would attack, it would have a decreased die roll of 1. There's a few aspects of some cards. I'll let you read through it, of course, once you have your own version of this. But outside of that, there are some important aspects with it that I would like to take you through. So there's mainly the number 9 functions, which are of rather importance. So, for example, we have over here, we have the Gas Trooper. The Gas Trooper has a range of 1, 2, and 3, so it cannot attack the same row. But as an ability, it has that whenever it's attacking, it's actually attacking all the rows at the same time. So for example, if the Gas Trooper, I'll move it so it's a bit more visible, would be over here. It would attack this row and a unit of this row. So because it has a range 1 of 4, over here it has a range, this will be attacked then with a 4+. Defense still counts, of course. So if I would attack the Guard, it would be a 5+ die roll. Else it would be, for example, if I would attack the Grenadier, it would be a 4+. And over here I can attack with a 5+, since they're all in attack position. I could attack the final row, but that is the Ironclad, that is the armored unit, so I will not be able to attack it. So these abilities are of tremendous importance to choose the right units for you at the right time to really push through to the opposing trenches. I'd like to go through a few units just so you have a clear indication on what it exactly is and what to be expected of it. So, outside of that, we also have the Flame Trooper. That is this card. And the Flame Trooper has that it can, as an ability, that whenever it attacks, it only has a range 0 attack. That attacks everybody within the row, but in sequence. So for example, we have over here the Flame Trooper. We have over here 1 unit, 2nd and a 3rd unit. So what happens is that you attack every unit in the sequence, but with an increased die roll of 1. So for example, if I have the Flame Trooper over here, which has an attack of 3, then this one will be attacked with 3, this one will be attacked with 4, and this one will be attacked with an attack of 5. So it will increase the dice roll in the sequence within the row. So that's one of the units of importance. I think one of the strongest units within the game is the guard unit. The guard unit is impassable to opposing infantry, which means that I wouldn't have been able to get my Flame Trooper over here in the first place, since there is a guard unit here. So I am unable to pass it. I can go to the same lane that the guard unit is at, but I cannot pass the guard unit, so I cannot go any further before the guard. I first have to defeat the guard unit. So your guard unit is one of the strongest characters in the game, or at least one of your most reliable characters in the game. But use them wisely. You have 2 of them, you have the 3 and the 5, although they have rather low numbers. So you have to take into consideration what your strategy is exactly. And then to get in total to the whole attacking and defending aspect. I think this might need a little bit more explanation. So, if you will attack, that means that every unit has a certain range. So, as I stated before, the rifleman is probably the easiest to show, has a range of 0. The range of 0 is 5+, 1 is, the range of 1 is also a 5+, and the range of 2 is a 6+. Most units, or a lot of units at least in the game, only have 2 ranges, which is 0 or 1. There are a few exceptions. The rifleman is one of them, the gas trooper is also one of them, and the cannoneer is also one of them. Outside of that, the landship is also a unit that has a range of 2. But they are rather limited within the game, and usually their last ranges, the ranges of 2 are rather weak in general. So that's something to take into consideration. So if you would like to have more of a distance war, or would like to more defend, it can be very convenient, but of course, be wary about that. So whenever you're attacking, as I stated before, this would be a range 1 attack for the rifleman, and this would be a range 2 attack. If a unit would be on the same row over here, it would be a range 0 attack. If a unit is indeed in defense position, you move it like this, 90 degrees. This will also be an action, as is also stated, for example, on the cards itself, that defend, moving in defense position, is an action. While it's in defensive position, it cannot move anymore. There is an exception, it's the Vanguard. It can actually move in defensive position, but that's an ability of the unit itself. Outside of that, if it's in defensive position, you cannot move it anymore. So you cannot go further down, or 1 row up or 1 row down. You have to get it out of defense position, which will be another action on that matter. So, as the final part of this video is the part of deck creation. Due to Kickstarter stretch goals that we have achieved, there are some extra units in the Kickstarter version of this game. So, at the beginning of the game, you can actually choose which cards you would like to have in your deck. So you can have only 1 of each number in the deck. So once you get to the 7, 8, 9, and 10, you can choose 1 of these units to have in your deck. You cannot have multiple of them. Which means, for example, as the 7s, you can choose between the Vanguard, the Breacher, and the Gunner. And the same for the number 8s. For the number 9s, you can choose between the Flame Trooper, the Shock Trooper, and the Gas Trooper. For the number 10, the anti-armor aspects, you can choose between the Grenadier and the Cannoneer. And for the armored units, you can choose between the Ironclad and the Landship. So you can create your own deck and your own units which you deem will be the most convenient for the mission that you have. And also you can look forward to synergies within these units to become the best player and make sure you get the 9 points as fast as possible or annihilate your opponents. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy playing this game as much as I do. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write them on the Board Game Geek page of Entrenched, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.